My fiancée slept with my cousin the week before our wedding, so I disappeared quietly and left her, begging for something she could never have. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I thought I had finally found the love of my life. Her name is Emily, and from the moment we met, there was this magnetic pull, I swear. It felt like something out of a movie. She was charming in the way that made everyone around her smile, ambitious in a way that made you want to match her energy. And, at least at first, she seemed genuinely devoted. I remember the day I proposed. Standing in our tiny apartment with candles flickering and the smell of her favorite lavender candle filling the air. When she said yes, I felt like the luckiest guy alive. Like the world had finally handed me everything I ever wanted. Planning the wedding was another level of excitement. I spent hours scrolling through venues, debating between flowers and color schemes, imagining the first look when she walked down the aisle. I was so invested that sometimes I caught myself daydreaming at work, picturing the laughter, the music, and the first dance that was supposed to last forever. I poured not just my money, but my heart into it, feeling like every little decision was building a world just for us. My family was complicated. They were supportive. In their way, my mom fussed over the seating charts and my dad offered advice about the budget. But there was always this undercurrent of judgment. Cousins would joke about Emily being too perfect, or ask if I could really keep up with her energy. Aunt Margaret kept making side comments about whether I was really ready for marriage. And my uncle would smirk at the idea of Emily being with someone ordinary like me. I laughed along, tried to shrug it off, but part of me felt those little digs, like tiny needles pressing against the joy I was building. And then, there were the small moments with Emily that made me pause. A distracted smile at dinner, a phone she tucked into her pocket too quickly, a text that she deleted before I could glance at it. I chalked it up to stress wedding jitters. Exhaustion, but somewhere deep down a tiny, nagging feeling started to whisper, maybe not everything was as perfect as I thought. I tried to push it away, to focus on the excitement because after all, we were about to start the rest of our lives together. But that little voice kept whispering, and I couldn't shake it completely. As the weeks went by, the wedding plans started consuming every spare moment of my life. I was working late, saving up for the last-minute details, flowers, catering, the little extras that I thought would make our day magical. I wanted everything to be perfect for Emily, and I told myself that the effort would be worth it when I saw her walking down the aisle, radiant and smiling, just for me. I even started noticing how her eyes lit up when I showed her a new venue or suggested a cake design. It was like watching someone fall in love all over again. But then came the little cracks I kept ignoring. She would glance at her phone a little too often, her smile a fraction delayed when I talked about the wedding. And there were these fleeting moments where I caught her staring off into space, distant, almost distracted. One night, while we were picking up samples of linens at the boutique, I asked, "Everything okay? You seem off." She gave me that practiced, sweet smile, the one I thought I knew by heart, and said, "I'm just tired, babe. Wedding stuff is stressful. Don't worry about it." I wanted to believe her so badly that I laughed and brushed it off. Even our families started adding to the tension without knowing it. My cousin Jake, who was helping coordinate some of the invites, kept making these jokes, little digs at how much effort I was putting in, like I was overthinking everything. Emily laughed along, but I noticed she laughed a little too quickly, like she wanted me to drop the subject. I felt a pit in my stomach, but I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe it really was just wedding stress. Still, some nights, when I lay in bed beside her, I would see her staring at her phone under the covers and my chest would tighten. That little whisper from before, the one I tried so hard to ignore, was growing louder. Something wasn't right, and even though I didn't want to admit it, I could feel a storm brewing just out of sight. A soft cliffhanger. I couldn't shake the feeling that the perfect life I imagined was starting to unravel. But I had no idea how fast it was about to spiral out of control. The closer we got to the wedding, the more I noticed Emily slipping further into her own world. It wasn't dramatic at first, just little things. She'd zone out during conversations, cancel small plans last minute, or laugh at jokes I didn't hear. I tried to chalk it up to stress, telling myself that planning a wedding this big would weigh anyone down. But deep inside, a sense of unease was growing that I couldn't shake. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find her texting under the soft yellow light, phone clutched tightly in both hands. I cleared my throat, trying to sound casual. "Who's keeping you up so late?" I asked, leaning against the counter. She smiled quickly, almost too quickly, and said, "Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." But there was a flicker in her eyes, something evasive, like she was hiding a storm behind that practiced grin. I nodded, forcing a laugh, but the pit in my stomach grew heavier. Even family interactions were starting to feel off. My mom, always the overprotective type, made another comment about how busy Emily was. Almost like she was warning me without saying it outright. Cousin Jake, who had seemed harmless at first, kept slipping in those half-jokes, smirks, and knowing glances. "You're really putting in all this effort, huh?" He'd say with a chuckle, and Emily would laugh along, looking relieved that I didn't notice anything. But I did notice. I started obsessing over the smallest things. The tone of her voice, the timing of her texts, the way she'd suddenly step away during family calls. I wanted to confront her to ask what was going on, but every time I tried, I caught myself holding back. I didn't want to seem paranoid. I didn't want to ruin what we'd built. But the anxiety was becoming impossible to ignore. And then there was the night I overheard her on the phone, speaking in hushed tones, her voice tight and careful, as if someone was on the other end she didn't want me to know about. I froze at the doorway, my heart hammering. The words weren't clear, but the secrecy was deafening. I wanted to burst in, demand the truth, but something told me to wait, to watch, and that decision would haunt me. Soft cliffhanger. Something was happening behind my back, and I could feel it closing in, but I had no idea just how deep the betrayal would go. The next few days were unbearable. I kept replaying that phone call in my head, every word, every pause, every subtle inflection, trying to make sense of it. Emily acted completely normal around me, which somehow made it worse. The contrast between her smiling, laughing self and the secret life I was starting to sense was suffocating. I found myself checking her messages when she wasn't looking, obsessively scanning for anything that could confirm or deny my fears, but there was always a tiny deletion, a fleeting absence, a gap where the truth might have been hiding. Family gatherings started to feel like minefields. Cousin Jake seemed to linger just a second too long, brushing against my shoulder or cracking jokes that carried a hidden bite. Emily would look at him, smile. Lynn rolled her eyes, in that playful way we'd always laughed about, but now it felt like an inside joke I wasn't part of. My mom noticed the tension too, and while she offered well-meaning advice, there was this faint, almost accusatory edge. "Are you sure you're not imagining things?" Every word cut deeper because, for once, I wasn't imagining. Then there was the night she came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I froze in the doorway of our apartment, watching her toss her coat onto the chair. "Emily, whose cologne is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She paused, hesitated, then laughed nervously. "Oh, that? Probably someone at work. You know, handing out samples." "Don't be silly," she said, brushing past me. Her perfume clung to the air, sweet but unfamiliar, and my stomach churned. I felt trapped between disbelief and dread. My mind kept asking questions I didn't want the answers to. Was it innocent? Or was something I'd never imagined happening right under my nose? The very thought of it made my chest tighten. I wanted to confront her, to demand honesty. But part of me feared the answer too much. That night, I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the warmth of her side beside me, but noticing the emotional distance growing like a canyon I couldn't cross. I wanted to scream, to cry, to disappear, but instead, I just felt a cold, creeping fear settle in my chest. Soft cliffhanger. I had started to suspect the truth. And I could feel the storm approaching fast, though. I had no idea just how catastrophic it would be. I never thought a single week could change everything. But it did. I stumbled onto it completely by accident. Emily's phone, left unlocked on the counter while she showered, buzzing with a notification. I froze, my heart pounding in a way that made it hard to breathe. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't, but something in me demanded it. My hands shook as I opened the messages, my eyes scanning for an explanation I desperately wanted to exist. And then I saw it. Pictures, texts, the unmistakable evidence of her with Jake, my cousin, my blood. The person I had trusted as family, as a friend, as someone who should have had my back. The texts weren't subtle. They were casual, joking, flirty planning even. And the photos. I couldn't believe my own eyes. They'd slept together. A week before our wedding? Every plan, every promise, every I love you now felt like a lie layered on top of betrayal. I dropped the phone, the sound echoing in the apartment like a gunshot. No, this can't be real, I whispered to myself, voice breaking. I felt sick, dizzy, like the floor had disappeared beneath me. I wanted to scream, to call my mom, to throw something, but the thought of Emily's smiling face made my stomach twist with rage and heartbreak. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, she looked at me with her usual smile. "Hey, what's wrong?" she asked. I couldn't answer. I just stared, mouth dry, mind racing. She tilted her head, sensing something, and my chest tightened even more. I wanted her to confess, to crumble. But I couldn't find the words to make her stop lying. I sank onto the couch, pressing my face into my hands, trying to hold back tears, trying to make sense of it all. Jake had always been a part of our family, someone I grew up with. How could he do this? How could she do this? Every memory, every laugh, every tender moment now felt tainted, poisoned. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was personal. A knife twisting in every direction at once. Soft cliffhanger. I realized in that moment that my life as I knew it had shattered. And I was standing at the edge of something I didn't know I could survive. The person I loved, the family I trusted, had both turned against me. And there was no going back. I didn't say a word that night. I just sat there, staring at the floor, letting the reality of what I'd discovered settle like a stone in my chest. Emily kept glancing at me, asking if I was okay, her voice soft, almost rehearsed. I nodded, but it was a lie. I was anything but okay. Inside, a storm was raging, anger, heartbreak, disbelief, but I knew that exploding right then would accomplish nothing. I had to think, to plan, to figure out how to protect myself from the mess they'd made. For the next few days, I started pulling back without explanation. I showed up for family dinners, smiled politely, helped finalize wedding details. But emotionally, I checked out. Emily noticed immediately. "You're acting weird," she said one morning, as I packed up receipts for the catering. I forced a laugh, a shrug. "Just stressed, you know. Work, wedding stuff, it's all catching up." She frowned, suspicion flickering in her eyes, but she didn't press. I was careful, measured. I couldn't give her any hint that I knew the truth. Jake, on the other hand, seemed oblivious or maybe arrogant, thinking I had no idea. Every joke he made, every casual smile, every lingering glance felt like a provocation. I kept my cool, letting him believe he had one, letting him reveal more of himself while I stayed silent. It was exhausting, but it gave me control. I realized that my reaction now would define everything, expose them and risk chaos, or disappear quietly and leave them to feel the consequences of their actions. The nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining confronting them, imagining ripping apart every lie, and then I'd picture myself walking out the door, leaving it all behind. The apartment smelled faintly of her perfume, a reminder of intimacy turned betrayal, and every little sound, her brushing her hair, the hum of the fridge felt amplified, reminding me that I was surrounded by deceit. Soft cliffhanger. I knew I couldn't stay in this state forever. I had to make a choice, fight, forgive, or vanish, and whatever I chose would change everything. Emily started noticing the distance, and the first time she confronted me, I almost slipped. "You've been so cold lately? What's going on?" she asked one evening as we sorted through wedding invitations. Her eyes were searching, but I kept my expression calm, measured. "Just thinking," I said, shrugging casually. A lot on my mind with everything coming up, she frowned, unconvinced, but let it go. I could see the unease in her posture, the subtle way she hesitated before touching my arm, like she was testing boundaries she'd once crossed without fear. Jake's presence now felt sharper, heavier, like a constant reminder of the betrayal. He kept making offhand comments, smirks in family group chats, little jokes meant to get under my skin. "Still surviving the wedding chaos, huh? Hope you're keeping up," he typed one night. Emily laughed at it, tilting her head like she found it charming, and I felt my jaw tighten. They didn't know that I wasn't just noticing, I was absorbing, calculating. Letting the weight of their arrogance sit with me, every interaction became a careful balance of composure and control. I smiled when relatives commented on how excited I looked, nodded when Emily chattered about dress fittings, all while the pit in my stomach grew heavier. I had to stay in the room, stay part of the plan, but behind every calm gesture was a storm I was trying to harness. I wasn't ready to explode. I needed patience, and the more they underestimated me, the better. Even simple routines became charged with tension. When we walked into the boutique for last-minute flower arrangements, Emily's perfume lingered. Jake's grin flicked across the room, and I felt a quiet fury, like a coiled spring ready to release, but I stayed silent. I could feel the shift happening beneath the surface, the tiny cracks in their confidence forming, and it gave me a strange sense of power. I wasn't powerless, I just hadn't shown it yet. A soft cliffhanger. I realized that keeping my silence might be the most dangerous and most effective weapon I had. But the longer I waited, the more volatile the situation became. And I knew the moment of reckoning was coming fast. The closer we got to the wedding, the more everyone started putting pressure on me, even though they had no idea what was really happening. My mom would casually drop hints at family dinners. "Are you sure you're not overthinking things? Emily seems perfect for you." Her words were meant to reassure, but they felt like subtle nudges to forgive, to overlook, to ignore the tension I couldn't speak about. I smiled and nodded, hiding the storm inside, because no one could know just how deep the betrayal went. Emily, meanwhile, was playing her part perfectly. She acted flustered, busy, and slightly anxious, as if the stress of the wedding was the only thing on her mind. "I'm just overwhelmed, that's all," she'd say, running a hand through her hair. Her laugh was light, dismissive, but it had a sharp edge I hadn't noticed before, like she was testing to see if I'd call her out. Every interaction felt like a carefully choreographed dance where I was supposed to keep pretending everything was normal. I played along, letting her underestimate me. Jake, of course, couldn't resist adding fuel to the fire. One evening, while helping set up some wedding decor, he whispered barely loud enough for me to hear, "You're really taking this seriously, huh? Hope she's worth it." Emily glanced at him with a tight smile, and I could feel the quiet mockery simmering between them. It was infuriating, but I stayed calm, letting their arrogance show me exactly how blind they were to the storm. I was planning. Even the smallest moments became loaded with tension. A touch of her hand on my arm, a joke shared between Emily and Jake, a glance exchanged across the room, each one sent my mind spiraling. I could feel the trap closing, the emotional weight of the betrayal pressing down like an anchor, and yet I held my silence, savoring the power of knowing the truth while they remained oblivious. Soft cliffhanger. The wedding was just days away, and I realized that every interaction, every smile, every small act of manipulation was pushing me closer to a decision that could change everything. By the week of the wedding, I felt like I was suffocating. Every interaction, every smile, every small act of betrayal from Emily and Jake pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. I wanted to scream, to confront them, to rip apart the lies, but I couldn't. Part of me feared what that would do to me, to our families, to the life I thought I was building. I felt trapped between heartbreak and rage, powerless, even though I knew the truth. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory, every kiss, every tender moment we'd shared, now tainted by betrayal. The apartment, once our safe haven, felt like a prison. Her perfume lingered in the air, sweet and suffocating, A cruel reminder of intimacy turned into deception. Even my own family, unaware of the full extent, started asking questions, nudging me to be happy, to focus on the wedding. And I realized that no one would ever fully understand what I was feeling, not even myself. One evening, I tried to talk to Emily, to get some honesty, some clarity. "Emily, we need to be real with each other," I said quietly, my voice shaking. She laughed nervously, brushing my hand away. "I'm tired of all this drama, babe. Can't we just focus on the wedding?" The words hit me like a punch. She wasn't remorseful, wasn't worried-eyed, wasn't even a concern to her. That's when it really sank in. Everything I thought mattered to her. Every promise was meaningless. Jake's arrogance didn't help. I caught him smirking at me once, a subtle, victorious grin, like he knew he had all the control. I felt humiliated, betrayed not just by Emily, but by someone I considered family. The anger and despair collided inside me, leaving a hollow ache. I had hit rock bottom emotionally, a place where the pain of betrayal was all-consuming. Soft cliffhanger. I didn't know how I would get out of this, or if I even could, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay here, broken and trapped, and I couldn't let them see me crumble. Something had to change. I made a choice that night, one that would change everything. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't beg, and I certainly wouldn't cry in front of them. I realized that my power wasn't in confrontation. It was in disappearing quietly and letting the consequences catch up to them. The thought gave me a strange calm, a sense of control for the first time in weeks. I started preparing in silence, packing only what I needed, organizing my finances, making sure no one could trace my next steps. The next morning, I acted normal. Smiled, joked, helped finalize last-minute wedding arrangements. Emily noticed, of course. "You're acting." "Weird again," she said, frowning. I shrugged. "Just tired." "Can't wait for everything to come together," I replied, voice even. She nodded, seemingly satisfied. Unaware that the man she thought she knew had already made a plan to vanish from her life forever. Even Jake seemed oblivious. He leaned casually against the wall during one of our family gatherings, smirking, thinking he still had the upper hand. I made no sudden movements, no subtle hints. Nothing. Every laugh, every nod, every polite response was calculated. Let them feel safe. Let them believe they'd won. I held the truth tightly inside, savoring the irony while they reveled in their arrogance. I was quietly reclaiming my dignity. That night I left. Not a word, not a confrontation, just a key dropped in the mailbox and my things in the car. The apartment smelled faintly of Emily's perfume, a bitter reminder of the intimacy she had used to betray me. I drove away without looking back, feeling a mixture of grief, rage, and liberation. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt alive again. Like I had taken back a small piece of myself that they had tried to destroy. Soft cliffhanger, somewhere back there. Emily and Jake were waking up to the emptiness I left behind, and I knew the realization of what they had lost would hit them harder than anything I could ever say. But I wasn't ready for them to suffer yet, not fully. The messages started pouring in almost immediately. Emily's texts, frantic and pleading, filled my phone like a storm I had no intention of weathering. "Please, I don't understand." "What happened?" One read. Another. "I can fix this, I swear, just talk to me." Even Jake tried, sending half apologies, half justifications. Every ping made my chest tighten, but I didn't respond. I had realized long ago that no explanation, no apology, no manipulation could undo what they had done. And I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I could feel their panic growing with each passing hour, though I wasn't there to witness it. Emily must have been imagining a confrontation, rehearsing how to coax me back, trying to use charm, guilt, or tears, but it was all too late. I had already walked away from the person who had broken my trust. In doing so, I had reclaimed something far more important: my peace. Every message they sent, every desperate plea, was a reminder that their world was unraveling. While mine was starting to rebuild, there was a strange satisfaction in that silence. I pictured Emily pacing our apartment, phone in hand, finally confronting the reality that I wasn't coming back. Jake's smugness would have dissolved into panic. realizing that the person he thought powerless had quietly outmaneuvered them both. It wasn't public humiliation or revenge in the traditional sense, but it was cleaner, sharper, and far more satisfying. I had the upper hand simply by refusing to engage. I spent the evening reflecting on everything, every lie, every betrayal, every stolen moment of trust. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but it was paired now with clarity. I understood what I deserved and, more importantly, what I wouldn't tolerate. Emily and Jake were trapped in their own consequences, and I was free, rebuilding a life that was mine again. Soft cliffhanger. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift slightly. But the final step of reclaiming my peace and moving completely on still lay ahead. Weeks passed. The silence I kept became my shield. Emily's messages slowed. Jake's attempts to justify themselves faded. And finally, the apartment, the wedding plans, the betrayal, they all belonged to the past. I found myself laughing again at little things, enjoying quiet mornings with coffee and the sunlight streaming through the window. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt like I had reclaimed my life, not just physically, but emotionally. The control they thought they had over me was gone, replaced by a calm, unshakable strength. I didn't need anyone to witness my victory. I didn't need revenge that left scars on my hands or theirs. The power lay in my disappearance, in refusing to let their lies dictate my world. I walked through streets I'd never explored, traveled to places I'd always dreamed of, and built a routine that revolved around me. Every choice was mine, untainted by their deceit. And each day felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I thought I'd lost forever. When I finally allowed myself to think of Emily or Jake, it wasn't with anger. It was with recognition, a clear understanding that their actions had consequences they couldn't escape. I didn't gloat. I didn't confront. I simply existed in a space they could no longer reach, a life they couldn't taint. That, I realized, was the ultimate revenge, not through confrontation, but through empowerment. And somewhere deep inside, I felt a quiet smile of satisfaction. I had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation, and I had emerged stronger. The person who had been crushed by lies was gone. In their place stood someone who could trust again, love again, and never let anyone undermine their worth. I had walked away not just from Emily and Jake, but from the weight of their choices. And that freedom was worth everything. Final line, soft closure. I never looked back. And I never regretted leaving, because sometimes the strongest love you can find is the one you give yourself.